Is it okay if I videotape?
Yep, videotape as much as you would like. And I'll see about getting these on the other ones on YouTube, right? Instead of just only on Talent. So 8 pounds of clay. The same principles still apply to throwing. It's just a larger amount. This is just slap centering, right? So I can get this relatively on center just by slapping. And it doesn't have to be perfectly on center, right? That's where everything else comes into play. Before I get all messy, I think I'll back up my video so we have a more full view. Okay. This is where I like to use a sponge because then I can add water when I need, and it works as a great surface tool. So I'll always start with compressing first. And I'll really use my right hand as a tool and press that in on the side. And then I'll begin with my first pull for cone wedging. So compressing the sides and lifting it up. And the reason for this is it's easier to add pressure and center the clay with less amount of clay than the whole thing. So bringing the clay up will center the inside, and then pressing down will do the same thing, right? So it's you know, compressing on the sides and on top. This takes practice. Okay. I usually like doing this about 3 times. All right. And I want this to be taller vase. So my mound is going to be wide and a little bit tall. Right. So yeah. Hey. Is it for glass or? Oh, gotcha. If I can't at the moment right now, or does someone mind opening a door? Tim, duty calls. Thank you, sir. You asked the right person. Thanks. Right, so I want my mound to be a little bit higher because when I open this up, I want to get a lot of verticalness with my clay, right? And then another way that I like measuring, I think I've explained this before, is that my finger width height from the wheel head. So I'll center this clay to be about 4 finger widths to get that height. And then opening is just the same. Okay. I really like using my thumb as a tool. I'll always add support with my other hand so it doesn't get hurt. Thank you, sir. And then for opening, just a little bit more, using both of my hands and pinching in on the side and bringing it out for that donut. And I have my sides all nice and stacked. And because this is sizable, I always want to check my bottom. Okay, so my clay is about 1.5 inches. So I'll take out my bottom just a little bit more. All right. And then checking again. So it's down to about in between 1/2 and 1/4 inch, which is where I want to be. 1/2 inch is good. 1/2 inch is ideal for something like this. We want to have a nice, thick enough bottom. So if I were to throw with my fingertips with this much clay, it would has a potential to make your fingers hurt a little bit. So I'll start with my palm. And again, this is one of those practice things. So I'm going to press my palm in on the side and lift it up. And just add a little bit of pressure on the inside and squeeze that clay together. And we want to make that cone shape, right? Cylinders, we want to make a cone. Bowls, we want to make a V. And just kind of continue on from there. This next step, I'll use my knuckle. Because again, there's just a lot of clay right here, and I want my fingers to last for my lifetime. So if I use my knuckles, it's more force. And I'm pressing in and up. Right. And then this is where I'll collar. So I'll add pressure in from the bottom on the sides and bring it up that way. So my hands are kind of like I'm gonna catch a football. And this is just another way to pull up the clay. So making that groove, squeezing that clay together, and then pressing upward. So similar to cone wedging, right? And I get a little bit more height. It narrows everything and sets up for my pull. Let's see if I can get this guy just a little bit more height. There we go. Okay. And this is where I'll stand up because it's easier to stand and pull this height for me, which is also why the wheels are raised, right? It's easier on your back. So wetting my outside and inside, I'll add pressure on the bottom. This is where I'll go to my fingertips because there's not too much thickness of clay to hurt it. But more pressure on the base. Slightly pinch that clay from the inside. And then squeeze and pull. Okay. I'll do this a couple times. So adding pressure on the bottom, starting that groove, squeezing that clay together between my fingers. It's a more pressure than you might think. Okay. So my clay is starting to wiggle a little bit. That means just the tension from up top is starting to twist. So my walls are getting a little thin, and that's usually a good sign of how much the clay can take. But so when I'm pulling, my inside hand is just slightly above my outside hand. I'll bring it up like that, right? So should we tempt fate? Might get one more pull here, but I think that's going to be it. This will be like the kind of final shaping pull. All right, you can see how it's kind of wiggling on me. I'm not going to get much height from this. There you go. So the setup is good. And since I'm going to be slipping the outside, I want to take off all the slip here. So with my metal rib, I'll do a rib pull. All right, so it's the same thing as pulling the clay. It's just using my rib. It'll take off all that slip and tighten up the surface, right? So all that came off the clay. And I'll start at the middle because that's where most of the leftover slip is right now. And I'll just work my way up. I think that'll be the last one. So now, this is always why I like having a bucket of water. I can clean my hands really well. Now I can begin shaping. I'll just slightly adjust this so we can get a better view of the bottom. So with my wood knife, I just want to clean up that bottom just a little bit. I can take off more if I want. I can always trim up more. At the end. and I'll begin shaping from the inside, right? So I'll start with the bottom, compress my bottom with this edge and shape with my curve tool. So just to bump it out enough. I can clean off all that slime. There's still a little bit of water in there, so. I'll clean that up too. Can anyone tell me why I clean up the water on the bottom of the pot? What's that? Soft spots? Yep. Getting there. It cracks. Yep. If water's in the bottom, it can soak in the clay and then will form a crack, right? So it's good to take that out. So now that my bottom is kind of set, I can pull up to the top and I'll kind of stop just before I get to the rim. So I want to close this in a little bit and make a nice lip. And now I'll switch to my metal rib just because it's round all over the place. And it can get a real nice curve from it all. So I'll work from top down. And then work from the bottom up. Yeah, it's kind of like whatever you want to do, right? You can feel it out. I'll always start at the bottom first and then work my way to the top and then do whatever I think would be right for the shape. You know, this would be kind of a nice classical jar, like a cookie jar. You can see how far you can take this. Like you can really stretch the inside. Depending on how wet the clay is anyway, right? So with that round rib, I can make a really nice round jar. And so as you see how I'm pressing out on the top, it affects the neck. So it's back and forth dance. So while I have my body shaped, I'll go and recenter the rim. And then this is where I can collar things in a little bit. So just like throwing, except with a little bit more finer touch. You know, I'll have my fingers on the inside and my finger on the outside here. And this brings this in. So we're taking a larger space and moving it into a smaller space. So you got to be really delicate. Otherwise, it'll crumple. And so here's the back and forth. I'll stretch out my shoulder just a little bit more. So I want to have a nice round vase for the slip to fall on. having something that's nice and round is really great for slip trailing. Okay, and then come back. Okay, get a little bit better view of this collaring here. Right, so with my fingers, getting a little bit of water there, pressing in, pulling up. Right. More pressure on the outside, compressing that in. It's a real fine touch. And I'm really not worried about that lip wobble on top because I really kind of like it. And we're getting close to the end here. So when I get close to the end, I'll begin using my rib to close things in a little bit. And this is fun. So we'll see how far we can close this in. I'll support the wall on the inside with my fingers and compress. With my rib. And just kind of go back and forth. And once my hole becomes a little too small, I can use the end of my wood knife to shape my shoulder and kind of make it nice and round. Almost kind of looks like a beehive, right? And I am coming up on the end of shaping here. So the last thing I'll do is I'll use my straight edge on my metal rib and make sure I support my lip with my fingers on the inside. Otherwise, it'll just kind of collapse, right? So you can really smooth this out. And there's a real nice edge on this metal rib here. And if I kind of dig that in and press down, I'll get a real nice shoulder. Right, so it's that little sharp edge between the flat and the round that will create this nice little pot, right? And I've got a lot of scum on top, a lot of slip on top. And one of my favorite tools I like finishing with is a piece of plastic. And so if you cut a rectangle of plastic and then fold that edge over, you get a really nice line, right? So we have tons of plastic here in the shop. This is something my high school teacher told me or taught me, and I've used it ever since. So cut off a piece of plastic, fold over that edge, and just let it glide over the top. It makes it nice and round, and then it cleans off all that slip so it's not pointy. And this one last little touch to make it nice and curved. I think that's it. All right, so any questions about that before we get to slipping?
I think it's the same thickness all the way.
It's different. It's thicker on bottom than it is on top. So I try to get it as even as possible.
When you push it out, doesn't that make it?
It'll thin it out, right? So when we're stretching it, it'll thin it here especially, but the bottom is usually going to be the thickest part, just purely because of physics. You know, the bottom will need to be thick to support more weight on top. Okay. Yeah. Top. Yep, I'm gonna put it on Talon. Yep. But now the fun part. We'll do some slipping. So I got 2 pots. I got this one, and then I have one that's dry back here. What I want to do is I'll decorate this one differently. And this one is dry, so I'll show you why you don't want to slip a wet pot, because it'll just crumple in on itself. It's kind of cool, but not what we want, right? So this bee clay slip has been sitting around for a little while, and I thickened it up. So it's like cream cheese, well, maybe like frosting, cream cheese frosting, there we go. So we just want to make sure, as opposed to, I don't know, choose your metaphor here. So when you're using this, you know, you can get a clean bucket and just take a little bit, scoop it in, and from here, like really the best way to apply this is just with your hand. So starting at the top down, and this is just to get it on there, right? This isn't even the design I'm going for, which is just like super fun. And this turns out really great in the wood fire. So just saying, anybody, right? So you want to make sure that you get good coverage. And you can always kind of start again, right? So this is pretty cool. Like even just like this, maybe just leaving it like that, right? The fun thing with the red clay and the bee slip on top is that the red clay will color the slip in thick and thin areas, which is kind of fun. So, you know, if what was I gonna do? Let's do the rib on this one. So with my slip on there, I'll start my rib at the base and work upward. So just kind of running it, creating a groove. and it just smooths everything out, right? So instead of having all those finger marks, I have a couple, nice areas, right? And then the top is always the fun part because this is where the rib releases. So don't be afraid to like mess around with this, right? Because the quick gestural things are really most successful, right? If I take too much time with it, then it generally doesn't work out quite as well. So I think, that works, right? And I have enough to like do this again. So, if you go faster, you'll get another design, right? If you go slow and with the wheel too, right? If you add pressure, what does that look like? Right? I have this spot now that is thin on top, so the red clay is going to show through. I get these really nice drips here, so you can keep adding slip if you want. And because this is our test piece, we'll kind of mess around just a little bit more. All right, so with my rib, I can bounce it, right, which is kind of wild, right? So it adds texture to it too, right? So all I did was just bounce it from top to bottom, and like that's kind of cool. So I think we'll keep it there, and we'll start on the other one. And this is just clay, right? So this isn't glaze or anything. It's fairly abundant, and it'll go right back into our reclaim. So don't be afraid to use it, right? So in cleaning this up, just wiping off the bottom, and like a dummy, I forgot to put this on my back. So we'll put the water slide removal method to the test. All right, it's another good demo. All right, so cutting through. I'll add my water on back, and then bringing that water through. I'll do it one more time for good measure. Now I have a nice slippery surface. So if I just touch my fingers and twist, it'll glide across that water. I can take it off on my hand and well enough put it on there. So still got some finger marks, but this actually won't survive. So we'll see. Maybe it will. Maybe it will survive.
Well, I don't think it'll survive.
Too wet, right? So
Is that why? Well, sorry, I stepped up.
oh yeah, it's
Too wet.
Too wet, right? It's like slipping your with the black slip, right? You always want it to be leather hard. And if you don't let it firm up, the water content will just kind of eat at the clay. Right? And so we'll do this one. So remember, if you can grab a clean bucket, that's helpful. And because I dried this piece out, it might absorb a little bit of that moisture, so it may take a little bit more slip than you think. Okay. So finger swiping, or just using your fingers in general as a tool, you can start at top and work your way down, just wiggling it. Okay, so that creates a pretty wild design. You know, using 4 fingers and just running it up and down will also kind of create some texture too. A lot of it is kind of just figuring out what looks good to you, you know, and you can always reset.
That's just going to dry on.
Yep. Yeah. The interesting thing is that these ridges right here will actually set in because they're mostly water content. So when they absorb, the water absorbs into the clay, this ridge right here will be a little less pronounced. It'll suck into the surface. Yeah. You'll still have texture, but not as much. Okay. Like you'll see the ridges and things like that.
So you'll see that moment.
Yep. Yep.
Smaller.
Yeah. And I really like the rib look. So I think I'm gonna do that for this one. And so again, starting at the base, kind of working my way up. And you know, we'll see how that looks. Right, I got that funny little dip right there too. And because this is also runny, if I'm on my back here, I can lift up my edge and tap it down a little bit, and my slip will move just a little bit down the edge. So, you know, another fun thing to consider. But wait, there's more. So you can dip your cups in here just like dipping them in the slip. right? So again, leather hard, right? I've got my cup. My slip is all nice and thick. And right, so this is really thick, right? So from here, you know, you can brush it off. I would normally brush this off in the bucket, right? And with those sharp edges, can just clean them up just a little bit, right? So I have some texture to it there as well. So we'll see how this guy turns out. And last one, I'm going to dip it and kind of do the same thing. And pull it down. And this is one of those things where, you know, wind and air can decorate a piece as well too. So kind of like, you know, blowing glue with straw, I guess. So that'll also give some texture, right? So fun things to do with slip if people are interested, right?
So with the red clay.
Yep.
What does it look like with the slip over top of it?
It will look, it'll be a combination between dark and light, and there'll be spaces that like transition, especially in a wood fire. We'll fire these in the gas kiln and we'll take a look at them. Yeah. We'll keep a couple of them for wood fire maybe. Yeah.
Not the white, the gray.
You can use it with the white clay too. It's just with the black or with the red clay, it will show through a little bit more and have more variation in color. Right? So we got a whole bucket of it here. It's easy to mix up. It took me all but 20 minutes, you know, on Friday. So if you guys want it, it'll be up on the tabletop over there. And yeah, it's just clay, right? So no harm in using a lot of it. We have a lot, and we have a lot more coming. So yeah.
Can you carve into that slip when it's dry?
Yep.
Or you can't?
Yep,
It won't just
exactly.
flake off?
It won't flake off, right? If it's done at leather hard, yeah. Yeah, you're welcome. Hopefully that.
I thought it was gonna be a lot harder to do.
No,
Like
it is.
some big technique.
Let the wheel do the work for you.